All right. Chris here from The Lazy Marketer, and I'm with Andrew Hansen and Sarah Young from Digital Worth. We're back for round two of chatting about ChatGPT, among other things. And so in our last video discussion, we kind of did a zoomed out take on like, what does all this stuff mean, right? So clearly, ChatGPT is sort of a proverbial Napster moment. There's a cascading series of effects that we don't and won't understand until they play out. But clearly, this is sort of a watershed moment for AI and I think for digital marketing and internet entrepreneurship in general. So we're back for round two, and we're going to get a little bit more granular, a little more dialed into pragmatic stuff. So like real life situations. And, the three of us have been involved in building out niche sites, affiliate sites, content publishing in general, to one degree or another for like decades. And so I think that's a pretty good place to start. The open question is like, what's the best way forward now for someone that's in the niche site business entering a chat GPT world and all that it inevitably ultimately is going to entail? So maybe I'll drop that and we'll go around the table, so to speak. And, you know, yeah, let's start there. Andrew?
Happy for me to go first, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this. There's a lot of fuss at the moment about the ways that ChatGPT might replace the work that people are doing, and no doubt there will be some of that in the future. But it's looking more and more like the best ways forward for niche site owners and content marketers in this new ChatGPT world is actually in finding the ways that combine human intelligence with the AI. The more tasks, the more content tasks at least, or the more non-code tasks, let's say, I do with it, the more I see that the best output, the best results that you seem to get are when you combine an expertise on the strategic side with the ideation capacity and just the pure data that ChatGPT has. The combination of those two things seems to create the best outputs. So when we're thinking about what to do next and how to change the way that we build niche sites moving forward, I think that's the starting point. It's like finding the ways to augment what we do to make improvements using GPT rather than what tasks can I hand off to it directly.
That makes sense. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that people should be using ChatGPT as a personal assistant, not to replace anything, even when it comes to coding, but especially when it comes to content. It's better to use it. I was trying to explain to somebody how they should view it. And I said, imagine you have a personal assistant that you absolutely can't trust. It's a genius personal assistant who is great when it comes to logic and remembering things and retrieving things from memory and connecting things, but it will lie to you and without even thinking twice. And sometimes it'll just pretend it knows things without actually knowing them. And of course doesn't have experiences, feelings. So totally agree with you, Andrew, on this one.
Oh, that's awesome. That makes sense. I was talking to my friend Philippe about this, and we've just sort of been riffing on it. And he had a really interesting observation. He was sort of saying like it's kind of the era of the one-man band in some ways that this is maybe unlocking. And so it's like you've got your star, your rock star, and even the way music has gone kind of recently, there's a lot of like session artists that come on for either recording or even for like concerts where it used to be like in say the 80s, whatever, everyone knew every member of Guns N' Roses, right? But now it's kind of more like you really just have the front person, whoever, like the Weekend or someone, and the band and the apparatus is behind them. Like, they're all professional and they're awesome, but they're definitely background. and they're sort of interchangeable. And so in this sense, like, is that the role that AI becomes, where you sort of need this central driving visionary expert like the human that can figure out the idea spark and what to do, and then the middle work is done by AI, by ChatGPT or whatever, and then the human comes back in to polish it, to make sure it's nuanced, to make sure it's not, Sarah, like you say, the most unreliable but credible sounding personal assistant, right? Um, and so, like, I wonder if it's kind of like this is the missing middle in a way of just sort of water carrying and wood chopping, where now humans get pushed to like the start and the finish of whatever process, if that makes sense, with ChatGPT.
Mm. I wonder if that's true, if in any model where there's a kind of a star player and then this backup team or apparatus or set of tools or whatever, this to me looks more like a moment where everyone in the team, depending on what your business is, we're talking about content businesses, niche sites, marketing stuff. I wonder if actually it's more like that everyone in a team should have something. Well, everyone in a team has their abilities now augmented by GPT. So everyone
Mm.
probably has something that they can do with it, at some task that they do every day that they can now do better with the aid of this tool. Whatever part of the process they specialized in, some small aspect of it can be probably automated or done better with this tool.
Yeah, I like that take. I mean, um, that's definitely the more positive outcome, right, for everyone.
At least
Um,
for now, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think certainly it's probably some mix of everything, right? Um, but specifically for content sites, specifically for when we think about our process for this kind of stuff, you've talked about creating briefs for writers is now greatly simplified, or at least faster.
Mm.
Um, are there any other processes that come to mind that already have been, Chat GPT has been instrumental in like changing, fast tracking, improving?
Sarah, I want to hear your update on this first because you and I were talking about this briefly through the week. I've got a couple of things I want to say, but I know you've got some as well.
Okay, yeah. Um, where do we start? Okay, so in terms of writing content, uh, we rely on Google a lot for to rank and to get traffic. And Google right now, I mean, we've been experimenting a lot and working with a ton of affiliate sites, looking at a ton of affiliate sites lately. And we know that Google really cares about topical depth and topical authority. Google really wants, if you're going to write on a specific topic, Google wants you to go deep and completely cover it. That's going to help you rank. That's going to get you traffic. So that's our goal when creating content sites. So ChatGPT is very good at helping you come up with content ideas to cover a topic completely, both when it comes to deciding what articles to write and when deciding whether an article covers the particular topic it's supposed to cover completely. You can tell ChatGPT, give me ideas for topic to cover when it comes to this larger topic. Give me ideas of articles to write. Let's say you want to have a site about cleaning and you want to talk about robotic cleaners, robotic vacuums. So you could tell ChatGPT, give me a list of articles I should be writing if I want to cover the topic of robotic vacuums completely. And it will tell you, I mean, it will give you a whole list of the different aspects and what you should write about. And then let's say you've done your keyword research and you want to write about a specific robotic cleaner. You can come up with an outline and tell ChatGPT, what am I missing from this outline in order to cover this topic completely. That's one of the things that it's very good at, coming up with things that you might have forgotten. That's one example. We mentioned creating briefs, creating outlines for articles. You tell ChatGPT, write an outline for such and such article, and it will do that for you. And I very much agree with what Andrew said before, that you kind of use it to augment your skills. So it's not just the start and the finish that you do, you're also guiding it. So as ChatGPT is giving you an outline or a list of articles, you can continue to guide it and say, expand on this, tell me how to do that, and ask it questions to make the process better. It's very much you working with ChatGPT together to create those things.
Hmm.
I'll just
Yeah,
build on
interesting.
that really quickly. Sarah, this is a prompt that you told me about in the beginning, but I've actually used it now and published new content with it when it comes to helping you understand the topics that you're publishing on and covering them with more depth. We've used the prompt that's where you take a piece of content on your site, you give ChatGPT an article and you say, here's an article on this topic. What could I add to make it more comprehensive? Give me suggestions broken down into an outline format with instructions that will help me researching the thing. And so it looks at your whole article, it gives you suggestions, it gives you the you can have it give you the headlines to add in, or you can arrange the headlines by the popularity or how likely they are to be searched or whatever you want. But in terms of like adding depth to your content, yeah, it's massive.
It's really good. And I've been doing this as well. And I found one interesting thing. Remember how I told you that you can't rely on it? So that's another example where it might come up with things that are not 100% relevant. Or if your article is covering the topic pretty much in depth, saying all the important things, it might come up with, because you asked it to come up with something, it might come up with things that are not really necessary. So you got to keep using your brain. I mean, Andrew asked me the other day if if you can stop using your brain. No, I mean you have to keep using it. Sorry.
Well,
I had to try.
that's some sad news. I was really hoping we could get to a future where, like that Simpsons episode, Homer has that little bird that like taps the keyboard for him, you know,
It's
the
close.
nuclear reactor. So we're not quite there, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Chris, just while we're kind of on a roll with these, I wanted to throw another one out there. We've talked a lot about stuff that you can do when, for people who are listening who've already got sites, they're already publishing a lot maybe, but there was one that the value of it really struck me since our last call. I started experimenting with it more, and that is for the people, for people in your audience who've say used your or who've read your conduit method report and they've thought, what is the right market for me to apply this in? How could I start a new site with the conduit method? What would be the niche that I would pick? And you only need to play with it for a few minutes to realize that for market research and for niche selection, GPT is incredible. So I I told you before this that I actually play with some prompts that I wanted to tell you about um, on this interview. So I'm going to grab them quickly here. So like
yeah, awesome.
just for pure entertainment purposes, I just put in some prompts like, so let's say you're looking for a new niche to enter, but you really have no idea where to start. There's nothing, say, in your own expertise that stands out. You don't have a hobby that seems like it would make for a good niche site. Like, what could you do? I started by saying, what are some groups of people that could, oh no, hang on, there's a better one. I started by saying, what's a hobby that has grown in popularity since the pandemic started? Give me a list of 10 hobbies. And so it's not only like
Awesome.
give me a list of hobbies, but it gives some measure of popularity according to the data it has. Of course, you would want to check this against keyword research tools and everything else, but in terms of a starting point, it gives you a bunch of hobbies. So there was things like home gardening, baking has become more popular, woodworking, etc. And there was a list of 10 of them. And I could have said, give me 20, and it would have given me 20. Anyway, that that is like the baby version of this prompt. From there, you could do 100 different things, and it'll give you a couple of examples. So um, from there, you can say to it, you can pick one of them, say like woodworking. You can ask it, what are some questions that uh, people who are looking to get into woodworking might be asking? Now you start to get some market insight from it. So it might tell you things like what are the tools that I need to start woodworking? And you can go further than that. You can say, give me some questions that people might ask if they're thinking about getting started in woodworking. Output them into a table and rank them in order of the likelihood that they would be searched or something like that, or rank them in order of their popularity. And you can just keep going, deepening this information. I'll give you another one. This ramble's got another couple of minutes, but hopefully it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
I said, I gave it the I was thinking about another niche, the niche of kind of remote working, this huge number of people who are suddenly working from home. And I asked it, what are the top challenges for remote workers? And it listed a set of challenges. It goes like isolation and loneliness, difficulty balancing work and personal life, distractions and lack of focus, etc., etc. So that's all interesting. That is a the beginning of an insight into a market that could be the basis for a conduit site. I started thinking about this kind of site that basically helped people manage their lives if they now work from home. There's obviously a whole range of products and tools and services that might be useful to them that you could review and present, whatever. Anyway, that's the beginning. Then I said, so it gave me a list of these challenges that people might face. And then I said, for each problem, suggest a product or a tool or a service that might help someone overcome it. And now I've got this swath of things that could be affiliate offers. It could be advertising opportunities, all kinds of things. So it's like, for the problem of isolation and loneliness, there are platforms to help people connect. There are forums, there are this and that. For difficulty balancing work and personal life, there are task management apps, there are this and that. And for everyone on the list, there is just products, tools, services, and monetization options, basically. And even this is like scratching the surface of how deep you could go with getting insight in a market. And the bottom line is, yeah, I could have found all of this by Google searching if I wanted, but this was 15 seconds. It was zero time for me to get to this, and I've got a level of insight that would have otherwise taken, I don't know, an hour or more.
Uh, this is like, you remember the early days, like, this was like weeks of digging into stuff and there's like, this is hours and hours of screwing around on Amazon.com trying to figure out like a market, whatever. Like, it's incredible.
Mm. You can just keep going. Like, I could have picked one of those products and been like, give me 10 questions that somebody might ask if they were considering buying a X. And then, I mean, yeah, it is endless. The possibilities for content creation, for niche ideas. Yeah, we could go on.
And that's your feeder content. Like, we've talked about sort of um the new conduit structure where it's like, you have your whatever main reviews, highly researched, direct experience, whatever. But then really the traffic you want to get is through the feeder content, those kinds of questions, right? It's like in market, um, you know, serious prospect questions like what, and coming up with those, pre-GPT, if you will, the best source was really like Reddit and forums and that kind of stuff, right? But that only goes so far, and those threads have to exist. Like, it's surprisingly shallow what's out there, especially when you get into like very specific niches, right? You got to be pretty mainstream before that's readily available.
Totally.
So like this is just incredible, right? Like, and even if it's like, as you both know, it's like you don't need crazy traffic volume on this kind of content. Like, even like a zero keyword, apparently, right? It's going to bring in some, right? And if Chat GPT is picking this up, it's getting it from somewhere, right?
I
Anyway,
want to add to that it's not only that it takes a shorter amount of time, which it definitely does, but it also does a better job than many of us would do. Because if you're going through Reddit or forums or Amazon, uh, it's not just gathering the information, it's also figuring out what's more important, what comes up more times, what bothers people more. And that requires some thought, and not all of us are great at doing that. And ChatGPT just does it for you. It just tells you what the important ones are, what the more common ones are. And of course, like I said, you have to check everything. But this is an area where it definitely shines. What you just described, that was really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, so we've got kind of like not even content expansion. It's more like maybe expansion is not the right word, but it's like um it's a way to just create much more complete content, right? So we talked about, okay, GPT, look, here's the current article. What am I missing? What can I add as like follow-up questions, whatever. That's really awesome. We've talked about obviously the content briefs, and now going into market research where frankly, I mean, that's just really exciting. Like this is a massive application right there. Just a very quick detour, but like building Zag, the core app for that um, business was this thing called compound interests. And it was using natural language processing to basically, really we were scraping Google SERPs for a given core keyword, condensing all of the content on those URLs using a very, very rudimentary form of AI to kind of pull up like themes and then going one order further to kind of map out a market, right?
Mm.
But that was a kind of a robotic process. It was sort of effective, but that was like months of building, testing to have it kind of spit out halfway useful stuff. Um, this is doing it conversationally, instantly, and better. And it's organizing it for you. Like this is like we're not talking when I was building that, that was like the forefront of what was commercially available, and that would have been 2018 or so,
Mm.
right? So we're 2023 barely, right? Really, it's like we're just out of 2022. That's 4 years where all of a sudden, like this is orders of magnitude better, right? And what happens in 12 months from now? What happens in 4 years from now? Like that's where my head goes, right?
It's wild. Yeah, it's hard to imagine at this point.
Yeah, truly.
I want
So
to, can I
go ahead.
bring up just one more thing that I found ChatGPT really helpful and I'm not a writer, actually. I publish content, but I'm not a writer. Sometimes I find it difficult to come up with the right word or phrase um, or how to explain something, how to write something eloquently. So now ChatGPT can help me with that. So I might have, I wanted to we wanted to write an email for the new year, and I wanted to describe what happened in the previous year, and all I could come up with was we had two new grandchildren, and one of my kids got married, and I gave it to ChatGPT, and I said, write this, improve this, and it came up with a great paragraph. The young household was bubbling with excitement this past year, and it just turned it into something that's fun and easy to read, which I edited, but it just gave me some kind of something to work with. Or if I'll forget how to say something, I'm like, what do you call it when somebody does X? And it will give me the word for that. Um, Descriptions for articles, titles for articles. When I have a hard time coming up with them, it will give me 10 suggestions. From them, I'll choose a really good one or combine two. So even this allows somebody who's not a great writer to improve their writing, which I find incredibly helpful.
Mm. Yeah, actually, that's a thing that's interesting in its own right, where in the beginning, it's the main commentary on this tool seemed to be that that GPT would be great for taking away all of the most rote, repetitive tasks for people, and it seemed more like a kind of workhorse that could do simple tasks. But when it came to creative work, it could never do creative work like humans, and that's where humans should focus their effort if they want to remain valuable. Actually, it's starting to look like for creative tasks, for like ideation, for coming up with new things, it's amazing. And I notice like the little things that I do that previously required some brain power. One example was coming up with domain names for our customers. When we make these plans where we say, here's a good market for you to get into. And one part of it is, here's a good domain name that would be great for a site in this market. And for a domain name, there's a lot of criteria that we're looking for. Like Chris, a good domain name has to have a number of things, especially when SEO is involved. So it has to be as short as possible. It has to be catchy and memorable. It has to be on the theme. It has to be interesting and short and whatever. And so now we've been honing these prompts of like, come up with a domain name for me that is on the theme of X, whatever it is, that uses alliteration, that would be good. You can even tell it specific things like that would be good for a website that compares and reviews electronics. And I clocked it quickly, like the things that it was coming up with, they were better than the ideas that I was coming up with before when I was doing this task myself. And I consider myself good at doing that task. I was like, whatever, I've done this a lot. I felt good at it. I was suddenly getting these domain names where I was like, this is cooler and better and more interesting in all the important ways than anything I would have come up with myself. And like, so yeah, I don't know what future that leaves for the creative people, but for now, it's a good thing. It's exciting. It's another thing that it can actually do well that maybe it wasn't supposed to be able to.
You
So
can
is that
say,
why
give
you,
me a domain name that's based on a pun. That came out with some really good things. Some
Yes,
really
they weren't awful.
incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
that's awesome. I was going to say, so is that why you started alliterationnation.com? Is that the new,
That is actually one of the ones that it
yeah,
suggested.
right on. Um, I mean, holy cow, like that, how many hours have I spent on GoDaddy? Just, like,
I thought about that actually. I thought I suddenly want to be a domain squatter again because all of the epic domain names, all the funny, like cool domain names that somebody's going to want in 5 years, you could use ChatGPT to come up with the names and you could buy them all now and then just wait and hope for the best.
I mean, yeah, like I let an awesome domain name lapse accidentally. I own cycle.ai. But yeah, so I bought it like 5 years ago and just whatever, put it in the freezer. And I didn't realize like my email for that registrar, because it's a weird one. It's an Antigua, right? That's the AI TLD.
Okay.
Anyway, it was landing on a defunct email address. So I was getting all these notices, but I wasn't getting them, right? So it's like, that was a good one.
That's a bad day.
Yeah, that was not fun. So I mean that's holy cow. You know, you're right. When you think about that sort of capability, that really does go into the vision category, or at least it gets into that. It gets into that creative, ideative space where, it still needs coaching, but like that's really impressive, right? And it's not going to have the business brain, at least not yet, um, in its current state, but like filling in those gaps, that's I don't know about you guys, but I've agonized over a domain for like a week, right? For like a certain project or something that's not just another kind of, throwaway site. Like it takes a while to find something good, right? So that's really interesting.
Yeah. Another point that came to mind there was, and this is another just general piece of value that it's providing at the moment, is to do with the volume. So you know how before you're describing a situation where if you want to find out the questions that people in a specific niche group are asking, yes, you can pull them up. But it's so manual that you're getting a small number of them at a time. One of the reasons it takes so long is that you get one from Reddit and then you get one from Google Auto Suggest and you get one from the keyword research and whatever. There's no limit to the volume that you can get from ChatGPT. That's what's so ridiculous. You can go, give me 20 domain names that fit this criteria. Give me 50 domain names, and it will just keep coming up with them. And there, you do see turning points with certain tasks where it just stops being able to. The quality seems to be there in this number of them. When you add more, there isn't very much. But it's the same with all of these things. With the domain names, you can instantly get such a high volume of it that yeah, it really reduces it. Yeah, it's a huge saver of time.
So, unless we have sort of two categories we want to cover on the AI impact front and like practicality. is there anything in the awesome category that we want to cover? Because I want to also get to things to avoid.
I thought we could do the avoid next. I worry about just blathering without end on the new things that you can do.
We can, yeah, there's a lot of euphoric realizations that we're all having.
That's right.
And they sound awesome now, but in 6 months it'll be so commonplace. It's like, oh, okay, all right. All right. So if we're cool with that, I mean, one thing that comes to mind, we've talked about again, kind of expanding or extending content, and kind of making it more thorough. Um, where are we at as far as what we think about actually publishing AI generated content? We talked about it a little bit last time. We now see sites like bankrate.com and Red Ventures generally. And other like BuzzFeed came out, I think last week. I mean, holy crap, what a moment. How many did you guys catch how many staff they're letting go of?
No.
But it's substantial. It's like the majority, I think. And so they're going to an AI first content um, content business.
Hmm.
Their share price that day went up 400%.
Yikes.
So the shareholders are all about our new dystopian future.
Yep.
Um, and so one of the things that came out from that though is honestly, this is a very quick detour, but I think it's very interesting. They have this article, it's like our new way forward or something. If you go to BuzzFeed, BuzzFeed AI, whatever, you'll find it. And it's the CEO talking about their new vision. And one of the things I thought was really interesting as one of their examples was personalized on the fly content for like mainstream, where it's like, you know, answer a very quick, like 3 question quiz and we'll generate a funny story about you, or we'll generate like a personalized version of the news for the day, for you. And it shows up on your version of BuzzFeed. I don't know if it publishes, permanently or whatever, but like now we're talking about user-led, AI-driven custom content that you go to like BuzzFeed to experience, right? So now like it's a two-way street as far as like seed and like whatever publisher and user, right? This is nuts. So maybe if you want to quickly discuss that, then we'll jump into the bad stuff.
I only have bad things to say, Sarah. If you want to,
Wow, this just takes everything a level forward. Um, Without knowing how they're doing it, I'm gonna guess that they aren't just uh, feeding what you say to ChatGPT and asking it to produce something for you. They they probably gave AI in advance some kind of material that they publish on the site, or the kind of thing that they want to see on the site. Maybe gave it a ton of examples and then told AI based on that, generate this piece of content for me. I think this might actually, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for us, content publishers, but it seems like something that we'll be able to use in the future when we understand AI better, and that is feed it in advance a ton of our own content in our style, in the kind of format that we want, and then tell it, okay, here's a topic, generate content on that, give me an outline for that, or even write an article, which we will then later edit. I assume that's what BuzzFeed is doing, and that I really see that as the next level, not just having a conversation with ChatGPT, but like pre-feeding it with a ton of information of our own that we already have, and then telling it, okay, build on that, make something like this, use this kind of style, which I think some companies and people are doing that already, and I assume that that's what BuzzFeed is doing. I don't think it's a bad thing unless you use it in a bad way, which would just be mindless. I think that it requires human involvement in advance in order to generate something like that that looks automatic. But I mean, it is automatic, but it is also based on human work. It's not taking over just yet, Andrew.
No, that's much more positive. I was thinking about how that would be so great in the future to have to have fed your, say, user data to whatever. It's just even if basic stuff like your analytics or your search console data or pay like time on site bounce rate stuff. And if you could serve a dynamic piece of content that changed depending on, say, the keyword somebody searched when they to find your article, or the page path that they used through your site, it could, for example, reorder the paragraphs, or it could use a different tone. It could like rewrite the style of the article to suit them, knowing that if they came from this particular keyword, they were probably from this particular kind of a company, and this language would make more sense to them or whatever. That would be amazing.
Well, yeah, like I mean, two things come to mind. One is, isn't it funny that we used to do this at a very rudimentary level? Just like, do you remember those old auto-generating sites that it would generate a new page from every unique keyword that someone used to find your site, right? They're just
Yeah.
like bottom barrel crap, but like it used to work back then, right?
Mm.
So there's that. The other thing is, when you think about a company like Mutiny HQ, I think that's what they're still called. Anyway, they are using that. I forget the name of there's some central data source. Anyway, it can recognize kind of who you are on LinkedIn, your email address, and a few other things just from you browsing. So it's sort of like a digital fingerprint. And it will like Mutiny. I don't know. A year ago when I looked at it, it was like you could personalize your homepage for like a B2B SaaS company, say, where it would if someone was a CMO, it would show them like the CMO landing page. If someone was like a CTO, it would show them like the more tech focused one, right? So there's already versioning for that kind of stuff, but this takes it to a truly like N of one custom individualized, like their input, actually changes the content. I mean, that's freaking incredible. Like this is going to be like just from a customer journey kind of like content experience or whatever you want to call it, like at high ticket B2B sales, this is going to be huge. Like whoever builds this CRM is like that's the next billion-dollar company. Anyway, um, like just fascinating to think about all those sort of pathways back to BuzzFeed and sort of back to publishing. And like we've talked about, AI is cool and how it's helping. What do we want to be wary of right now? Like, I mean, what comes to my mind is like there's going to be so many lazy people that just go and build 1,000+ page websites because now that's easy. So, what should people be aware of as we go boldly forward into this new frontier? Like, what do they need to know about where and how to use this appropriately?
Yeah, so I did an experiment with this since our last call. I think that was really informative to me. It was I wanted to basically test the limit of what how could I get to an article that is good enough quality that it could be published with the minimum involvement of an expert, the actual writer who would normally write this piece of content. I wanted to see how much of this could me or someone without the expertise on a particular topic put together just using ChatGPT and their own brain, and how could you get that to a point where it could be published. While I'm talking, I'm going to bring up the email. Sarah and I were talking about this, and I wrote the exact details of it down. But it's basically, I started by writing this article myself, and I just, with a brief knowledge of the topic, I've asked GPT to put together an outline for an article on this topic, and then I asked it to answer some of the questions that it had raised in the outline. And my plan was to get on paper as many words as possible that were clean and that made sense in English, and that covered as many of the bases of the topic as possible, and then give this piece of content to a writer so that rather than writing the whole thing from scratch, they could basically edit it, fix any problems that it had. They could add to it with all the really important high value details that were needed in addition. So basically the way it started out was there was a 1,700 word article. That's what I got out of GPT just by myself. To me, it looked pretty good. It all read nicely. It was great. I used one of those the AI checkers. There's originality.ai. That's a big one I've been using at the moment. I I did write a unique introduction for this article, and I edited some of the pieces, some of the paragraphs to put extra words in. Anyway, the final product of this thing came out at 79% AI. So a checker could detect that this was 79% AI and only 20% human. Already that I thought was pretty good. I thought it would be higher. I thought it would be instantly recognizable as just fully AI because it pretty much was. Anyway, so I took this article and I sent it to a writer, the person who usually writes this content. This writer, they've got a lot of expertise in this topic that's fairly technical, and they get paid $120 for 1,000 words. So to begin with, I've got 1,600 words on the page, which if it come from this writer, it was worth $200. I gave it to the writer to edit it, and I gave a pretty clear set of instructions to like check for like fact check it, add this kind of detail, make sure it doesn't have this other kind of thing and whatever. Anyway, by the end, the writer got back to me. They added a lot of content to the article. They took it from, I'm just checking the facts here. They took it from, it, it was, what was in the beginning? It was 1,200 words in the beginning. They got it to 1,700 words. And in the new version, the AI checker, the score was 79% in the beginning, and it took it down to 34% AI. So everybody is picking their own poison with this at the moment. You could ask 5 people and they would tell you a different number of like what they would be willing to publish in terms of a percentage of content that came from an AI. 34% to me seemed pretty low. And when I was reading the article, it was like it had as much information as it could have had. But the bottom line was this guy added a few hundred words to the article. The article that would have normally cost $200, because it was only a few hundred words, it cost $24 for him to write those words. And kind of just because I felt guilty, I added a bonus payment to it for just his time. He said he spent half an hour like reviewing it and making small corrections to the rest of the article. So it cost $50 instead of $200 to get this, what to me was a perfectly publishable, good quality article on this topic. There's last things to say about this. I apologize for how long this went on.
No, no.
For one, it was cool because this is a direct example of like bringing down the cost of content. We touched on that last time. I think that's a huge part of what we're all trying to do in this next phase with ChatGPT. It massively brought down the cost of content, but there was meaningful downsides that point to some of the avoid things that we want to talk about here. So it was just a bit of a faff to actually publish this article because not only did ChatGPT get certain things wrong, but it got them wrong in a way that was pretty annoying to disentangle. So some of the facts of it, when it came down to some of them were me and some of them were the writer clarifying why exactly this particular point was wrong and adding the new information, it wasn't really clear cut. It wasn't just a date wrong here and a number wrong here. There was context things that were wrong. And so the avoid point that I spent this long story getting to was that for right now, like having it take over tasks fully, write full articles for you, write full scripts for you that you're not going to heavily edit, check, confirm, and add human expertise to, that's an avoid. It's really tempting and it's right there and you can almost pull it off, but probably it's going to be more messy than you think when you actually come to getting it done.
That's it. So, I mean, in the end of all that, just like from a time, like let's say total time, your time, the writer's time, all that stuff together, would you say we're at a point yet where it actually is faster to have ChatGPT write a substantial portion or like the first draft, or is writing out a detailed brief with ChatGPT helping you, giving that to the writer? Like, is that still the best workflow, would you say?
that's definitely an option. Yeah, it's just messy. It takes some working out, and there'll be a process probably for every publisher, for every business about what the best way to do it really is. Um, yeah, which parts make sense to have the tool create for you, and which parts make sense to have added or edited by a human. That changes every time. But so overall, it was a massive reduction in the amount of time and the cost, but there's another kind of time and investment that is required to get the process for that right. It's a new process basically, and it can't just be jumped into and you expect to get a good result quickly with it.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, that'll make sense. I almost wonder if there's kind of, if you want to call it like job titles that are going to emerge of people that are at these different parts of production, right? Where there's sort of like ideation, and then like you get your raw article content, whatever, and then there's someone that's like really good at AI editing or really good at whatever it is, right? And you sort of have like a production line approach to some of this stuff. I wonder, right? Yeah, I wonder if it's we get to sort of that where you don't have writers anymore. You have people that you send raw content to, and they make it human, basically.
Right. Yeah. And then the prompt generators, so that can be a job title, someone who just comes up with all the best prompts.
Prompt engineer.
Prompt engineer.
Yeah.
You said this is real, right?
It's, I think so. Yeah. I mean, uh, the output that you get is only as good as your prompt. And you heard the examples that Andrew gave. These are really good prompts. They're examples of good prompts to give. And coming up with good prompts is not always easy. And you need to practice a lot and think a lot about why you want certain things and to understand strategy. Yeah, there's gonna be prompt engineering, and my opinion is that in the future, we're gonna be able to do so many more complicated things, and the more you understand how to use AI and prompts, the more you can get out of it. But the good news is that you don't have, like at this point, you don't really have to get into all these complicated prompts and have a deep understanding of prompts in order to benefit from ChatGPT. I mean, from the very basic level, you get a clear benefit from it, uh, from asking for domain names to helping with content. Uh, yeah, so there's definitely this is going to develop in some way or another and continue developing over the next years, and we'll be able to get to a point where we can do things that we can't imagine now because of it. Um, yeah, for sure.
It's really exciting. Like I was listening to this interview with Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. I forget who with, but anyway, he was sort of just talking about like actually like prompt engineering and that kind of stuff. And he's saying like it's exciting right now. He's like it's kind of a temporary stopgap. He's like his take on it was that in a few years that's all just going to be kind of we'll have UIs like we'll have a user interface that just sort of handles the vast majority of that, where there's sort of a deep learning element to all the prompts we're trying to give it, right? And it'll learn over time, like, okay, this was a good one. And so it kind of just like how Google now, like it's taken years, but it knows what you mean when you're searching for stuff, not what you're specifically searching for, right? And so I think we'll see a level of that develop pretty quickly with prompt engineering. But I totally agree. Like for the moment, like using Midjourney or certainly like Dolly 2, whatever, it's like it really is finding the magic words. I feel like I'm casting spells and seeing if they work. It's kind of we're at that level. Um, right now, I wonder if we sort of change gears a little bit, unless there's anything else that anyone had to add. But um, I wonder if we talk about, we were talking about it earlier in the call, um, niche ideation and using ChatGPT to sort of help with that. But we're also talking about like where humans really live in this process as like a critical part of it. And I still think understanding how to look at a market that's going to be like profitable, that's going to make sense. We talked about the condo method, for instance. Um, you still have to have a business mind. You still have to understand, okay, there's a certain level of demand here that's inherent. These are approachable niches. These are approachable keywords. This is content that's not just overrun with stuff like VPN services or whatever. This is something that's actually doable. One of the things we're working on, and my audience will see this relatively soon, is putting together these basically pre-built plans, business strategies in a box for the conduit method. So maybe let's briefly talk about that and how this all sort of plays together with our new AI reality, where this is still within the full realm of human critical thinking. So maybe I'll toss it over and let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that it starts to look like is should continue to be the best role for people is in the strategy department. It's tying together the ideas from a number of fields and putting together a plan for achieving some business goal. Um, right now, ChatGPT is helpful for filling in all these little gaps and doing these individual tasks, but the value comes when the human intelligence applies this component of strategy. So one thing Sarah and I have been working on in the last 12 months is building these kind of business plans for our subscribers, where a lot of people think they would like to get into this business and they don't know where to start. And it's tricky because if you've never done it before, there are all of these unknowns where you don't know what kinds of mistakes you might make yet. And our idea was to kind of put this plan together so that if somebody wanted to start a site with the conduit method, let's say, that all of the most mistake prone aspects of the business could be covered by our strategic thinking. They could be put down in place ahead of time so that the person didn't have to worry about those particular decisions. Those decisions would kind of be planned from the start, and they could just sort of fill in the blanks with their own work. And now, of course, with ChatGPT. So these plans, they start by saying, like people can pick uh, niches that interest them. So we find a set of opportunities every month or 3 months, and we put together plans. One of them might be in a fitness niche, one of them might be in a niche of guitars, let's say. And the plan takes them from the very first step, from like, here's a domain that you should register, through to the very end. So through, here are the keywords that you should target, here are the articles that you should write, here are the competitors that are already succeeding doing some version of this that you could probably do a better version of. Um, here is the promotional strategies that seem to be working best in this market. And so the point is, because like any business, there's a level of complexity, and doing it for the first time is the hardest thing that you can do. So taking away as many of the unknowns as possible and taking away as many of the strategic decisions, kind of outsourcing the strategy part to somebody who, people like Sarah and I and you, who have done this for such a long time, you're able to see it in a completely different way than somebody who's starting from the beginning. You're able to anticipate what can go wrong and prevent it from the start. And if you can coordinate that into a plan, you stand a much higher chance of having it all work out than the average, than just kind of wading in blind. So that's kind of the idea of the business plans. There's a lot inside them, but that's the core concept. That's what we've been trying to do for people.
It makes total sense. It's um, it all like leaning more on the strategy too, even than just the plan. Like it's easy to plan, but you can be totally wrong. right? So it's easy to have a losing plan. And a strategy is a theory of how you're going to win, right? So when you think about what a strategy is, so for instance, like there's sort of a classic, business strategy explanation, and that's Southwest Airlines. And so they looked at the market, they realized that all the other airlines were using spoke and hub configuration to sort of whatever, figure out how to get people from A to B. And they figured out that if they had their own hubs or whatever, and they only flew from certain destinations, they could undercut everyone else on price by a significant amount, where they could charge at retail for flights below the cost of their competitors. And so by changing just like where they flew and how they figured that out, I don't know what the details are. People can Google it, but yeah, Southwest had this strategy of being able to be a viable business for literally less than the cost of their competitors. And so they ate up a ton of market share. And so, you know, without that strategy, they could have had any plan. Their plan could have been, oh, we're just going to like offer cookies and we're going to do this and we're going to have like some celebrity come in, but really, okay, the strategy is where you increase the odds of you winning, right? So like the fundamentals of call it the offer or the core business, that's a strategy, right? And then from there you build on it. And so like that's what these things are. That's why I'm really excited about it. Maybe speak to that a little bit as far as like what's the Southwest Airlines of the conduit method? How do we approach this?
Yeah, well, there's a direct analogy to that in what you were saying and to what we're doing with these plans, where every plan starts with us finding the sites that are already winning in one of these markets. So if you want to start a niche site on guitars, let's say, the plan starts by saying, here are a couple of sites that are doing really well in the niche of guitars. Here's all the information that we have about them, and here are the important things that you need to know about what they've done that's made them successful. The rest of the plan is, here is what you can do that would give you a competitive advantage against them. So here's what they've done well. Here's what they could have done better. Here's a unique angle that you might be able to take that would give you an edge. Here are the link building opportunities that they've overlooked, and so on. So it's starting with a picture of success, starting with something that's proven in the sense that you don't have to reinvent a wheel. Here's a business like you want to start that's doing pretty well, and here are a set of ideas and a plan for you to do a version of that that's a little bit better. And so, yeah, in that way, it's nothing as cool probably as the Southwest Airlines, like really reinventing a core concept like that and changing infrastructure. That's a bit much for like bootstrapping entrepreneurs that in the niche side business probably, but it's like taking the best parts of what are working and then finding the tweaks, finding the ways to do it that little bit better, keeping to a budget that are really replicable for any given person who would want to start this kind of business.
I
100%.
think
And go ahead, Sarah.
it's important to add that these competitor sites that we're looking at are sites that are not huge, strong sites that were created by big companies. We look at them and we can identify, okay, this is a one-person kind of site. This is a site that hasn't been around for that long. It doesn't have a lot of authority, and yet we have ways to tell approximately how much traffic is getting and how much profit it's making. And we look at it and we analyze it and we say, okay, how did it do that? How did it get to the point where it's making this kind of money, where it's getting this kind of traffic, even though it's a relatively new site that is run by one person and doesn't have any huge advantages that you might, like a regular person might not have. How did they do it? What are some like really easy points of entry into that niche? And we kind of uncover it and say, okay, this is how they did it. And like Andrew said, this is how you can do it better. But I think it's important to stress that these are not like huge authority sites. These are small sites that are kind of beatable, that you can do a lot of things better than them and get to the point where they are and surpass them if you do a good job.
Well, that's a really powerful point because you're talking about, evidence of success, but where it's not some Herculean venture-backed whatever, right? These are just solopreneurs or small teams where they've clearly got, they're onto a winning formula, right? They've got a strategy that works clearly. And this is not a giant moat to cross to go and compete, right? Along with, a differentiating position. And like you say, here's some things you could do better. Here's some gaps that they've overlooked. So that's actually far more useful than like, let's take a look at how Microsoft launched its latest version of,
Right.
like, great, no one cares. So like this is just far more tact, it's far more pragmatic. This is useful stuff for people that want to get into this. So that's really cool.
Another thing about that is that because we've been making these plans for the past 12 months, I think we've looked at hundreds of sites like this, a lot of sites. So once you've been looking at hundreds of sites like this and analyzing them, you start seeing patterns, what's working, what's not working. And then when you're looking at the competing sites, you kind of look at that like with having the general knowledge of what's working and what's not based on all the sites that you've seen. You look at that one particular site and you say, okay, this is what they're doing right, this is what they're doing wrong, and you can do better than them. It's much easier to identify what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong if you've looked at all these sites and you start to see the patterns of what works and what doesn't.
For sure.
I mean,
I've never thought
go
about it
ahead.
exactly that way, but it would be kind of like if someone wanted to start a gym and you were able to analyze 100 gyms, but only the ones that are profitable, which you can't really do. But with niche sites, you can see their traffic. If you're in the business, their monetization. You can make decent estimates at how well they're doing. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're looking at hundreds of niche sites, and we've found these ones that not only found what are the common denominators, like what are the things you have to do if you're starting a business like this, whatever the niche is, to make it work, but what are the specific things that you could do if you wanted to start a gym really close to this one, but you want to do a better job than them? How would you do that? Well, here's what they're not doing and whatever. So yeah, it's cool.
I mean, so several weeks ago, Andrew, you and I were kind of talking about this, and I mentioned that this is actually surprisingly similar to some of the consulting projects, one of which I'm currently engaged in. And I thought like might be interesting for people to know what this is actually worth at the consulting level. So for an example, my current client is, obviously I can't divulge who they are and stuff, but they're in the biotech space. They've raised on the order of a few $100 million. They're considering a spin out company that would occupy kind of a small niche of their wider thing for a strategic purpose. And they wanted a second opinion from a few experts on like, is this possible? Does it make sense? Like, is there a market here? And how would we go about it? Like, what would be our entry point? What would be our position? What would be like a core differentiator? How can we build a strategy to win if we're going to do it? Right. And so for a 90-ish day engagement like that, for the three of us with some supportive people, like not a huge piece, let's say a total team of like five, it was 85 grand, right? So that's and at the end of it, they'll get briefs from sort of each of us, right? Mine will be about 15 pages of like, look, here's what you have to know about the market. Here's who your buyers are most likely. Here's your most likely core USP, like the unique sales proposition. Here's why that creates a moat around what you're doing. It fits into what we understand about demand. This is your Southwest strategy, so to speak. This is how you can move in and actually like take market share. And then here's your go to market, given all that. And so like and I think honestly, that's like, we're coming at it as like consultant mercenaries. If you're to go to like McKinsey or Deloitte or something like that and have them do a strategy, it starts at like 250, right? So just to put some context on it for people, like that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I remember hearing that and thinking that I was in the wrong business. That was the first thought that I had. But then the second thought was, I thought it's good to know, it's cool to have that context and realize that that's the value that we're putting together with this, and it made me feel better about it. I thought, yeah, this is a good product. This is great.
Well, yeah, client work isn't substantially rosy, so let's put it that way. But
I
yeah,
don't doubt that for a second.
yeah. Um, but I mean, so that's really interesting. I think, obviously we'll be telling more people more about that in the coming days, but really excited to kind of introduce that, yeah, just as a concept. I think it's the most useful thing for people that are contemplating this, or that are kind of looking at, like, they get why the business model is great, right? Obviously, it makes sense, but where do I start? Like, what, even when you do have a niche in mind, it's like, well, what now? I guess I just start with the first review and hope for the best. Like this, to break it apart, to actually see it. I think it removes a lot of anxiety. I think it removes a lot of like the guesswork that goes into this stuff, where you can clearly see, like, these guys are doing this, it's working for them, here's what they're overlooking, here's what you can do, right? Just knowing that can save you like 6 months of hell, right?
For sure. Yeah, we've all been through that. Just
Absolutely.
getting it wrong for 6 months consistently.
At
um
least.
oh yeah, well, look at SEO. I mean, you don't even know until it's such a lagging indicator, right? Like you don't know how well you're doing, right? So um well, to maybe tie things back around to the overall discussion on finding our way as niche publishers in this new world post sea change. Like, maybe from each of us, some sort of final thoughts or final predictions, maybe just open mic, but um I can go first. I think first of all, there's a tsunami of AI content coming for every niche, unavoidably. I'm sure Google has teams that are sweating bricks about this, trying to figure it out. So I think part of it is you got to be prepared to see a lot of fresh faces in the SERPs, and just sort of deal with, I think, for the next year or two, an onslaught of AI content that Google's gonna have to figure out how to filter, how to deal with. So I think, like, that's a given, and I think it's probably just sort of um taking it on the chin, and just realizing that, oh, ultimately the best content, the best experience is going to win. That's just how it's going to work. Um, there's a few exceptions here and there, but by and large, that's who ends up winning. Um, I think the other thing is, this is going to move faster than people realize, and I don't know what it moves faster towards, but I'm doing a piece right now for another publication on, like, basically, will AI cause content hyperinflation, and digging into, like, really the trajectory of AI. I didn't realize that AI was technically invented in 1956, right? So that's the official start date, according to most people, for the first AI process. And it took till about 2010 until we had neural nets and big data and that kind of stuff. And you see that emerging, like IBM Watson came out right then. And then a little bit later, we get like the what's it called? AlphaGo. Like you start to see this emerge at that point. And then we get into these transformers, right? Which is what GPT is, and Dolly, and that kind of stuff. And that's fairly recent. And just the pace, like the steps that this is going to, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that building a 1,000-page website that's totally credible and basically indistinguishable from human content within 12 months, I don't think that's unrealistic. I think we're going to see that. And so that just, I don't know what that means yet, but I know that that's coming. That's going to happen regardless, even with like low quality content, just lazy people, lazy marketers. But I do think that um, there's going to be a credible version of that, like BuzzFeed and that kind of stuff. Like we're going to see that model take hold in a number of different ways. There's going to be an explosion of content. I don't know what it looks like yet, but it's coming. That's my piece.
To kind of add to that, the one thing I've been thinking a lot about on top of the like what are the quick ways that we can use AI to do what we're doing better is the thing that we can't use AI for, and I can't immediately see a way that we'll ever be able to use AI for this one particular thing, and that is to make people trust your website. So you can publish a huge amount of content, but if everyone's publishing a huge amount of content, something will have to make people trust this website over that other website. So this, in terms of places to focus, this actually seems more important now than it was, whatever, 3 months ago before we had this technology, where whether it's the link building side, the PR side, the like relationship side, whatever it is, like all of the brands that end up being first in a niche to get a certain level of trust, if we all have the same AI tools, they're going to win. And so if you're building at the moment, if you're at the phase where you haven't got that level of trust yet, you feels like you need to have it as quickly as possible by whatever means necessary. And it's not easy. It's not simple. Like you can't just press a button and have that reputation or that trust. So that's an interesting problem to solve in my mind.
Totally.
Chris, you said you were talking about an explosion of content. So I have to say that we've been seeing that already. I mean, since we started making these plans, I think we originally discussed what do we do if we see a site full of AI content, and I mean, it's one of the things that I check for when I look at a site. I'm like, okay, how many pages did they publish in the past year? And I look at that,
Mm.
and if that number is very high, I'm thinking, okay, how did they do that? Well, let's take a look at the content and see is this AI or not. And I mean, when we started like 12 months ago, it was really obvious that something is AI. It didn't sound exactly right. It didn't seem like a human wrote it. Now, now it's more difficult to tell just by reading it if it was written by AI or not. Gotten so much better. But something that I noticed was I recently went back to sites that I saw did really well by publishing 1,000 of pages, like thousands really of pages, and a really large number of them they kind of look like a bell, like they suddenly go up really fast and they're up for a very short time and then they go down. Google knows it already figured it out, and they're not against using AI together with human writing. They're just against what you said, which is just publishing a ton of AI content, thousands of pages without editing, without checking, and it doesn't work. I don't recommend doing that. It's already happened. There's gonna be a lot more than that, but that's not a good way forward. And Google already knows how to handle it. The question then comes like, what do you do? How do you integrate AI? Which is what we've been talking about all this
Yeah.
time. And like Andrew said, building trust is really important here, and you can do that by sharing your own experiences. If you're like, just showing that you're knowledgeable about the topic, amongst other things, but that's one of the ways that you can do that. Um, so yeah, the way of the future is to integrate AI and human thinking, like we've been talking about all this time. Uh, yeah,
That's a,
go
that's
ahead.
a really good point. Like it's like you say, um, yeah, it's almost like an accelerated run of cat and mouse, right? We used to see this with, back in our sort of heyday, it was like duplicate content and, people used to scrape Wikipedia just straight up, it's like dump that out somewhere, or like in public records, my old embarrassing niche. Like it was just the crappiest, like it was like phone numbers with like ad lib, some crappy script that kind of fills in stuff. And it would rank, like you say, bell curve, right? And then just it wasn't even like the neat bell curve, and it was just like a straight down, like just like one day, like your traffic zero, right? And um, so you're right. I mean, you're not going to get away, even if like pretend Google's not even there. How are you going to beat the bigger brands that can figure out volume at a scale you'll never be able to do as a small publisher? It's just not worth it. Both of you, I think, are dead on with figuring out like how to personalize your content and how to have it become trustworthy and linked to you. I think in a way this probably accelerates a shift towards like a very personable web experience for the sites that are going to do well, where like even actually going back to BuzzFeed, part of their strategy was to bring in, I think they called them like creators, where, it's kind of audience sharing in that way, right? So they want to bring really good talent in that can help BuzzFeed with its stuff, but also they're going to benefit as creators with their own followings, their own stuff, out of the BuzzFeed sort of mothership, right? So they get where it's going. Otherwise, you're going to lose your best people to Substack or to their own stuff or whatever anyway. So you might as well just sort of figure that model out now if you're a bigger site. And so that means for us, for affiliate publishers, niche publishers, et cetera, it's, you know, you can't be the obscure, anonymous, like faceless webmaster of some product site. Like it's got to be you. You're reviewing the stuff. You're there. It's your experience, your voice. You can augment that and make your stuff better with AI. But at the end of the day, you got to be front and center. It's got to be obviously your tone, something that your readers are actually going to respond to. Anyway,
Or hire somebody, right?
yeah,
You can definitely, I mean, we've done that. Hire somebody who's an expert in whatever your niche is about, and put their face and their content on it. But there has to be,
100%.
yeah, you have to show on the site that you're a real person with real expertise. Show a picture of somebody and describe their experience and why somebody should trust them.
I think too we'll see social effects from this. Like there's gonna be so many sites, there's gonna be so much content. And I think also on social networks, I think a lot of Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, whatever, it's gonna be AI, right? Of course, people will just automate that. And I think people will grow very jaded very quickly, where it's like, oh, it's just another, farticle, right? Like fake article. And like no one wants to waste their time with that. So I think you'll very quickly have this sort of cynicism build up where, now you have to have a person behind. There has to be a human touch.
Yep, I think so too.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other thoughts? Any other pearls of wisdom?
No, if we don't stop soon, we will go all day.
For sure.
Agreed. Well, this is great though. I think it's becoming more tangible, right? Like this is even the space between the first call and first discussion and this one, already so much has changed. Already, especially you guys in the thick of it, you're developing better processes. It's coming together. It's taking shape. Like this is moving fast and it's exciting. So it's cool to see that.
Very much. Yeah, thanks for having us, Chris. It was great chatting about this again. I'm sure it won't be the last time.
No, I
Yeah, it
think
was fun.
absolutely. I predict we'll talk again. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.